Jake lived alone in a small wooden cabin high up in the mountains. He had no neighbors, no phone, and no noise except the wind and the wolves. That's the way he liked it. No one to bother him, no one to hurt him, just peace, trees, and snow. But on one cold night, that peace was broken. The storm had been howling for hours. Snow fell heavy outside, covering the trees like a thick white blanket. Jake sat near the fire, sipping warm soup from a cup. He had just thrown more logs into the flames when he heard it. A strange, heavy sound. It wasn't a knock, not really. It was more like a body falling against the door. Jake froze, the cup still in his hand. He listened closely, heart pounding. No one should be out there, not at this hour, and not in this weather. He stood up slowly, walking toward the door. Another sound came like a soft scrape, then silence. Jake picked up his hunting knife from the wall. He didn't believe in ghosts. But this place could make a man believe. He opened the door carefully, 1 inch at a time. Then he saw her. A tall figure lay face down in the snow. Her skin was not human. It glowed faint blue under the pale moonlight. Her clothes were torn, strange and thin for this freezing world. Long white hair stuck to her face, now almost frozen. She wasn't dead but close to it. Jake didn't think. He dragged her inside quickly and shut the door. The cold hit him like a wall. But he ignored it. He laid her near the fire, trying to wake her. She didn't respond. Her breathing was shallow, almost gone. What was she? An alien? A robot? Some government experiment? Jake didn't know. All he knew was she needed help. He grabbed every blanket he had and wrapped her in them. Her fingers were long and thin, her nails silver. She looked peaceful, like she was sleeping after a long journey. But he could feel heat slowly leaving her body. She was dying. Jake pushed the fire higher. He placed her hands close to the warmth. Still, her body stayed cold. He touched her neck to check her pulse. Then something strange happened. A soft whisper echoed in his mind. He pulled his hand back. Eyes wide. Warmth. That was the word, but she hadn't spoken. Her lips hadn't moved. Jake stared at her face, unsure what he had heard. Then again faint and soft inside his mind. Warmth. Please. She was talking without words. Was this telepathy? Jake had read about it in old books, but he never believed it. Now, he wasn't sure what to believe. He leaned closer, and suddenly her eyes snapped open. Bright silver eyes, full of pain and fear. She looked at him like he was the last hope. In the world, her mouth opened, but no sound came. Still, Jake heard the words in his mind. You're human. Jake nodded slowly. She stared at the fire like it was treasure. Then she whispered again, not with sound, but thought, something. Followed me. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. He turned his head toward the window. The snow still fell hard, and wind pushed against the walls. But for a moment, he thought he saw a shape moving outside, a tall shadow, watching. He turned back to her. What are you? He asked, unsure if she would hear. But she only closed her eyes and said one word, hunted. Jake didn't know what kind of trouble had come to his cabin, but he knew one thing for sure. The woman in front of him was not from Earth, and whatever was out there in the snow, it was not human either. The fire cracked loudly, making him jump. The wind screamed outside like a wild animal. Jake moved closer to the door and locked it tight. He didn't know if it would help. He didn't know if anything would help. Behind him, the alien woman whispered again, "Don't let it in." And then silence, only the sound of fire, snow, and something breathing just beyond the wall. Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat near the fire, holding a piece of wood like a weapon. Every few minutes, he glanced at the window. The storm was still outside, but something else was too. He could feel it. It didn't knock, it didn't speak, but it waited. The strange woman lay wrapped in blankets near the fire. She didn't move much, but her breathing was better. Sometimes her lips parted, like she was dreaming, and when she did, Jake could feel her voice again inside his mind, not like thoughts, but like feelings shaped into words, soft, warm, and clear. "Your fire saved me," she said without sound. Jake didn't know how to answer with his mind, so he just nodded and whispered with his voice, "You're safe now." I think, but he didn't believe it. He could still feel that presence outside. Waiting for the fire to die, she opened her eyes slowly. Those silver eyes looked at him again, curious and sharp. "You're human," she said into his mind. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, what are you?" She paused, then she sat up, her hands glowing faintly under the blanket. "I was like them." "But I ran." Jake leaned closer. "Them?" Her face darkened, her glow pulsed low. She didn't explain much, only said, "I broke the law of cold." Jake didn't understand, but didn't interrupt. She continued, "My kind do not feel, do not share warmth. They fear it. They call it a sickness." Then she looked straight into Jake's eyes. "But I felt it. I wanted it. I escaped." Jake stood up and added more logs to the fire. As he did, he looked through the small window again. The storm was weaker now, but the shadow was still there, not moving, not walking, just watching. It didn't leave tracks, didn't breathe steam in the air. It wasn't alive in the way normal things were. Jake backed away slowly. The alien woman must have felt his fear. She stood, too, though her legs were shaking. She reached out and touched the wooden wall with her glowing hand. Tiny waves of warmth spread into the wood. The cabin groaned like it was alive. She looked at him again. "It's not a man. It's a heat drainer." Jake frowned. "What the hell is that?" She spoke in his mind again. "A hunter built by cold mines. It drinks warmth, kills feelings, turns life into ice." She placed her hand on her chest. "They sent it for me." Jake's mouth went dry. He stepped back and picked up his hunting rifle. He didn't know if bullets worked on things like that, but it was the only thing he had. The woman shook her head slowly. "No weapon can stop it. Only warmth." Jake blinked. "That's not helpful. I'm not a heater." The alien stepped closer. "You are. You care. That's warmth." Jake wanted to laugh, but he didn't. Outside, the shadow moved a little closer. The fire crackled, sending light flickering across the walls. She stared at the fire like it was holy. "I need more warmth, not just heat. Something deeper." Jake wasn't sure what she meant, but then she reached out and touched his arm. His body tensed, but he didn't pull away. He felt something rush into him. Not painful, just strange. Memories flashed in his mind. A silver city covered in ice. A line of people walking with dead eyes. A little girl with glowing hands locked in a cold room. He gasped, stepping back. "You showed me." She nodded. "I was that girl. They trained me to be cold. But one day, I felt a tear. It burned like fire, and I knew I had to leave." Jake couldn't believe what he had seen. Her memories felt real, like he had lived them himself. "Why come here?" he asked. "Why my cabin?" Her voice grew softer in his head. "Because humans feel, and your fire called me." The wind outside fell silent, too silent. Jake looked at the door and saw frost creeping in through the edges. The warmth inside was slipping away. She closed her eyes, placed both hands near the fire. Her body glowed brighter. "I'll protect us, but I need you to care." Truly, Jake looked at her. He didn't know who she really was, or what exactly hunted her. But in that moment, he felt something real, not fear, not anger, something warmer. He stepped beside her, the fire between them. And outside the door, the frost paused, as if waiting for its chance to strike. The frost on the door thickened like creeping fingers. Each second it spread higher, stealing the warmth inside the cabin. Jake stood close to the fire, but even its heat seemed weaker now. He glanced at the woman beside him. Vera. That's the name she finally shared with him. Her hands were pressed close to the flames, but her glow was dimmer. She was shaking, not from cold, but from something deeper, fear, or maybe memories. Vera looked at the window without blinking. The drainer is near. It waits for weakness. Her voice still came through Jake's mind, calm but heavy. He checked his rifle again. Even though she said it wouldn't help, he needed to do something, anything. "I don't get it," Jake said aloud. "What does it want? You?" She shook her head slowly. "It wants what I carry, a spark of warmth. It must destroy it before it spreads." Jake stared at her. "So your people built this thing to hunt down feelings?" Vera nodded. "They were never born with warmth. When one of us begins to feel, we are marked. Cold must erase heat. That is their law." The snow outside had stopped falling, but the silence was even worse. There was no wind, no birds, no sound at all, only the fire and the slow beat of Jake's heart. Then came the sound, soft at first, like ice breaking under pressure. Then louder, a scraping metal noise moving across the frozen ground. Jake moved to the window and looked out. His breath caught in his throat. A tall figure stood between the trees. It had no face, only a long, black mask of metal, thin limbs, arms like blades. Its body shimmered like glass touched by moonlight. It didn't walk. It glided. No footprints. No breath, just a slow, steady crawl toward the cabin. Jake backed away. "It's coming." Vera didn't move. Her eyes were closed and her body glowing slightly. "I need to build it," she whispered into his mind. "Build what?" he asked, confused. She opened her eyes, and he saw fire in them, warmth strong enough to fight. Jake didn't know what she meant, but he knelt beside her. "What do I do?" She looked at him and placed both hands on his chest. "You've felt pain. You've lost things. Show me." Before he could speak, his mind filled with images. His mother's voice on the phone saying goodbye, the graveyard where he stood alone, the dog that waited for him every day until the end. A fire in his chest started to grow, not anger, not grief, but the thing that comes after: hope, strength, the will to go on. The cabin lit up as Vera absorbed it. Her body pulsed with light. She stood slowly, her feet bare on the wooden floor, outside. The drainer was only steps away. The door began to freeze solid. Ice spread across the walls. The fire flickered, weak against the growing cold. Jake held her hand. "Let's burn it down." Vera smiled without showing teeth. The door exploded inward. The drainer entered, silent and terrifying. But this time, it paused. It sensed something had changed. Vera stepped forward, her body bright as the sun. "No more running," she said through Jake's mind. The creature raised its arm, ready to strike, but Vera reached out. Light flowed from her hand like fire made of memory. It touched the drainer's chest, and it screamed, not with sound, but with silence so loud it shook the cabin. The monster tried to back away, but the fire grew faster. Jake added his voice, his thoughts, his pain and warmth. Together, they pushed back the cold. The drainer burst into sparks and ice, vanishing into nothing. The wind returned. The trees swayed again. The silence was gone. Jake dropped to the floor, breathing hard. Vera knelt beside him, her hands still glowing. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. The fire inside her was alive now, and it had started in him, outside. The snow began to melt around the cabin. Just a little, just enough. Jake looked out the broken doorway. Whatever that thing had been, it was only the beginning. More would come, but so would more warmth. For now he had a fire, he had Vera, and he had a reason to protect it all. The snow outside the cabin had stopped, but the cold hadn't left, not fully, even with the drainer gone. Something in the air still felt wrong. Jake stood at the edge of the broken doorway, watching the forest. The trees looked normal again. The wind moved gently, but deep in his gut, he knew this was just a pause, not the end inside the cabin. Vera sat near the fire, eyes closed. She was breathing slowly, glowing faintly, not as bright as before. The fight had taken a lot out of her. Jake stepped closer and placed a blanket over her shoulders. She didn't open her eyes, but she spoke to his mind. "You're kind. That's rare." Jake didn't answer, not right away. He was still trying to understand everything that had happened. A machine built to hunt emotion, A woman from a cold empire who could burn it down with her feelings, and somehow he was now part of it, part of her. He looked down at his hands. They didn't glow like hers. But something was different. His fingertips felt warmer than before. Even in the cold, and in his chest, something burned softly, not pain, not heat, something alive. Vera opened her eyes and looked at him. "You carry my warmth now." Jake knelt beside her. "What does that mean?" She reached out and touched his heart with 2 fingers. "Your soul is linked to mine. That's why we beat the drainer alone. I would have fallen." Jake nodded slowly. It was strange, yet it made sense. He had felt it during the fight. Their memories, their strength, it had flowed between them. He remembered the cold girl she once was. And now he saw who she had become, a flame that refused to die. Vera stood up, a bit unsteady, but stronger than before. She walked to the window and stared at the horizon. More snow was coming, but that didn't worry her. Jake noticed her glowing. Hand was leaving warm marks on the glass, little signs of life. He smiled. "You're warming the cabin just by being here." She turned to him. "That's not enough. More will come." Jake's smile faded. "Like the one we just fought?" She shook her head. "Stronger. That was a scout. They know where I am now." Jake looked around his small wooden home. The walls were thin, the windows cracked. He had built this place to keep people out, not to keep enemies like that away. Still, it was all he had, and now it was her shelter too. "I'll make it ready," he said. For the next few hours, they worked together. Jake reinforced the windows with heavy wood and metal sheets. Vera helped, not with tools, but with her hands. She could push warmth into the walls, turning dead wood into living heat. Even the floor began to hum softly under their feet. The cabin was becoming more than shelter. It was becoming a shield. As night returned, Jake lit more fires. He placed stones warmed by Vera in the corners. She had taught him how to hold small amounts of emotional energy. Not enough to burn, but enough to glow. He placed one near his bed, another near the door. It wasn't magic. It was feeling made real. Later, they sat near the fire, both tired, but calm. Jake offered her warm soup, and she took it with a small smile. She had learned to use a spoon that morning. Little by little, she was becoming more human. Or maybe he was becoming something more like her. Either way, something between them was growing. She looked into the flames and whispered, "My people believe warmth is dangerous because it spreads. One spark becomes many." Jake leaned forward. "And now you're the spark," she nodded. "But I can't spread it alone." He placed a hand on hers. "You're not alone." Outside, the snow began to fall again, but this time, the flakes melted before they touched the roof. The cabin was no longer just wood and nails. It was alive with something cold could never understand. Warmth that could fight back, and far away, deep in the shadows of the trees, another shape moved through the night, watching, waiting. But as it came closer, it paused. The air ahead was no longer silent. It felt something strange, something dangerous to it. The warmth had started, and it was spreading. The snow didn't dare fall near the cabin anymore. Each flake melted before touching the roof. The cold still ruled the forest, but it stopped at the edge of Jake's home. Inside, the fire burned brighter than ever, not because of the wood, but because of what lived there now. Vera stood near the fireplace, her hands glowing with soft light. Jake watched her from the table, holding a hot drink and wondering how much had changed. He had lived alone for years, but now he wasn't sure who he was without her, and maybe he didn't want to go back. Vera turned and looked at him without speaking. He didn't need words to know what she felt. Something inside him responded to her, even in silence. Since the battle with the drainer, their connection had grown stronger. Sometimes he could feel her emotions before she even moved. She smiled gently. "I feel safer now," she said in his mind. But safety never lasts long. Before Jake could answer, the wind outside howled. Not just wind, there was a rhythm in it. Like footsteps made of frost, Jake stood and grabbed his rifle. He knew it wouldn't stop what was coming, but it made him feel ready. Vera stared at the door, her face calm but focused. "It's not alone this time," she whispered into his thoughts. Jake stepped toward the window and pulled back the curtain. What he saw made his stomach twist. 3 shadows stood at the edge of the forest. They weren't moving, just watching. They had no eyes, but he felt their gaze, tall, thin, almost shapeless like frozen ghosts wrapped in metal. And between them was something new, a smaller figure with silver skin. Kneeling, its head was lowered, but it shivered like it was in pain. Jake turned to Vera. "What is that?" She didn't speak for a moment, then softly she said, "They've brought one of mine." Jake's grip on the rifle tightened. "A hostage?" Vera walked slowly toward the door. "No, a message." She opened the door slightly, just enough to feel the cold. Jake stepped beside her. "Don't go out there," she nodded. "I won't, but we must listen." The wind changed again, carrying something else, a sound broken and strange, a voice not made with a mouth. "I feel pain." The silver-skinned figure raised its head. Its eyes glowed weak blue. Jake felt a sharp sting in his chest. The figure was like Vera, but not yet changed, still trapped, still suffering. Vera stepped out onto the porch, not far, just a few steps. Jake followed, heart racing. The cold tried to bite at them, but her glow pushed it back. She raised her hand and called out, "You can be free." The figure tried to stand but collapsed again. The other shadows didn't move. They weren't here to fight, not yet. They were here to show what would happen if Vera kept spreading her warmth. Jake understood it then. They weren't just hunters. They were warnings. Vera looked at him. Her face was calm, but her eyes were full of fire. "They fear me," she said into his thoughts. "They think love is a disease, that kindness is poison." Jake stepped beside her. "Then let's make it spread faster." The silver figure on the ground cried out again. Its voice was broken, but real. Warmth hurts, but I want more." Vera raised her hand again. A soft line of light flowed from her fingers and touched the ground near the kneeling figure. The ice began to melt around it. The shadows stepped back, not in fear, but in confusion. Vera's light reached the silver figure's hand, and for the first time, it smiled. The shadows vanished, not with sound or warning. They simply disappeared into the trees. But the message was clear. They would return, and next time, they would not bring a warning. Vera helped the silver figure to its feet. Its body was still shaking, but its glow had started, small, soft, like a candle trying to stay alive in wind. Jake looked at it. "Can it stay here?" Vera nodded. "If it wants to feel, it belongs here." Jake looked at his cabin, his quiet, lonely shelter. Now it held more than just fire. It held change, and change could not be stopped now. As the snow began to fall again, Vera placed a warm stone in the silver figure's hand. Jake watched the snowflakes melt in midair above it. He smiled. One spark had started it. Now another had joined, and soon others would come. The silver-skinned figure sat near the fire, trembling with every breath. Its body was still cold, but not like before. Now it was the kind of cold that knew warmth existed. Jake placed another log in the fire and watched the flames rise. Vera sat across from him, her hand resting gently on the figure's shoulder. No words were spoken out loud, but something passed between them, a bond, a beginning. Outside the cabin, the night was quiet again. But Jake didn't trust the silence anymore. Too many shadows had walked through it, too many enemies hiding in the cold. He stared at the fire, remembering how close they came to falling. Then he looked at the silver figure. It had almost been lost, but now something inside it had changed. Vera opened her eyes and looked at Jake. "She is called Lise," she said softly into his mind. Jake nodded. "She?" Vera smiled slightly. "She chose that word after hearing your voice. Names give shape to feeling." Lise looked up, eyes glowing faint blue. Her voice was still broken, like metal rubbing against itself. but it carried emotion now. I feel safe. Jake gave her a small smile. You're not alone anymore. The cabin, once built to keep the world away, was now sheltering more than just one secret. It held warmth that could fight back against the frozen laws Vera had escaped from. But Vera knew what was coming next. They wouldn't stop. Not after seeing her power. Not after feeling her warmth reach another. She stood and walked to the door. Jake followed her, his footsteps quiet. She opened it just enough to let the cold touch her skin. The snow had stopped again, but the sky was heavy. Clouds moved fast. Like something big was circling above. Vera looked up. They're watching. They know this place now. Jake stepped beside her. Then we prepare. Vera turned to him. You don't have to stay. They'll come for me, not you. Jake laughed once. I opened the door, remember? Whatever's coming, it's already found me too. That night, they began to work. Jake pulled out old tools from the storage shed. Scraps of metal, wires, batteries, things left from another life. Vera showed him how to guide warmth through circuits, not electricity, but living heat. They built small traps, sensors, light barriers powered by emotion. Each device only worked if someone cared enough while holding it. Jake tested one, a small stone disc with a glowing line through the center. He thought about his father, the last time he saw him. The device lit up bright yellow. Vera nodded. Pain is powerful when it carries love. By morning, the cabin was different. The wooden walls still stood, but under them were living veins of light. The air hummed with energy that wasn't fire or sound. Lee stood by the window, watching the trees. She didn't speak much, but her glow had grown stronger. She had stopped shaking. Jake sat near the fire, drinking warm tea. Vera sat beside him, her legs folded under her. He turned to her and asked, "How long do we have?" She didn't answer right away, then said softly, "Hours, maybe less. They won't risk another delay." Jake nodded. His fingers touched the edge of the stone disc again. He didn't feel fear this time. He felt something else, readiness. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about standing for something that the enemy didn't understand. Warmth. That night, the wind returned, not soft this time, but sharp and heavy. It pushed at the walls like angry hands. The fire flickered, but didn't die. The traps outside began to blink one by one. Movement. Jake picked up the rifle out of habit, then set it down. He wouldn't need it tonight. Not when he had something stronger. Vera stood in the center of the cabin, her eyes closed. Lee stood beside her, holding her hand. Jake stepped into the circle they made. Their warmth touched him before their hands did. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The door began to freeze again. Frost crawled like a warning. But this time, Jake didn't feel afraid. He felt fire. He looked at Vera. She nodded once. "They're coming," Jake whispered. "Then let's burn brighter than they've ever seen." The first crack came just after midnight, a long, sharp sound like ice shattering across the sky. Jake opened his eyes, already standing before the door. Vera stood beside him, her body glowing brighter than it ever had before. Lise held the small stone disc in both hands, the glow pulsing with her heartbeat. The cabin didn't shake, but the world around it did. The air outside had gone silent again. The kind of silence that meant something was about to begin. Through the frost-covered window, Jake saw them, not one, not three, but a whole line of shadows marching toward the cabin, tall and thin like before, but this time armored in deep black. Ice. Their steps didn't make a sound, but every footfall left the ground frozen solid. Behind them floated something larger, not a figure, but a machine, round and smooth like a silent moon. It hovered above the trees, and from its core came a low, cold hum. Jake turned to Vera. "What is that?" Her voice reached his thoughts like a whisper carried by fire. The final silence, a weapon of my kind. It doesn't destroy bodies, it freezes souls. Lise clutched the disc tighter, her voice still weak. "They want to end everything warm. Not just you. All of it." Jake nodded slowly, his hands calm now. He looked around his cabin, the same walls he had built with his own hands. This place had once been his escape, now it was a battlefield, and maybe a birthplace, because something had been born here that had never existed before. He stepped outside, the snow melting under his boots. Vera and Lise followed him without hesitation. The line of shadows paused as they saw the three figures glowing. In the night, then, the final silence opened. A wide beam of pale light shot toward the cabin. It didn't burn. It didn't cut. It simply erased. But the light stopped before it reached the porch, not because of a shield, but because of feeling. Jake reached for Vera's hand, and heat poured from his chest. His memories, his losses, his love, his strength, all of it filled the air like invisible fire. Vera's eyes caught flame, not with heat, but with purpose. She reached up and sent a wave of light toward the frozen army. Not an attack, an invitation, a chance to feel. The first few shadows stopped walking. Their bodies shivered, not from cold but confusion. Some raised their arms to strike, but the beam of warmth hit them. Not fire, not magic emotion, one fell to its knees, then another. Lee stepped forward, holding the glowing disc out like a gift. "You don't have to be cold anymore," she whispered. And her voice reached even the ones without ears. Something in the final silence began to flicker. The smooth hum wavered. The light inside it pulsed strangely. Vera stepped forward, raising both arms. Jake and Lise beside her. The warmth they carried grew stronger. The snow began to vanish in all directions. Grass peeked through. The trees shook, not from wind, but from something waking, something old. One by one, the frozen soldiers began to fall, not dead, but undone. The ice cracked off their bodies, revealing forms once like Vera's, long lost, long forgotten, now waking again. The final silence screamed not with sound, but with pressure. It tried one last time to erase them. But this time, Jake stood in front of it. He didn't glow, he didn't fight, he just remembered. He remembered everyone he had ever lost, everyone he had ever loved. And he let that memory burn. The weapon blinked once, then its light faded, its shell cracked, and it dropped into the snow like a broken shell. Silence returned, but it wasn't the cold kind anymore. It was the kind that comes after a storm, soft open, waiting for life to fill it again. Jake turned to Vera. Her glow was soft now, peaceful. "We won?" he asked. She nodded. "No, we lived." Lise laughed quietly, her first true laugh. It echoed through the trees like sunlight in sound. Together, they returned to the cabin. The fire was still burning. But now, so were they, not in pain, not in war, but in warmth that would never die.